Glad that you're here to double check that you're in the right place. This workshop is called Mental Health and Spiritual Health. We're better together. Are you in the right place? I'm glad, because we've locked the doors and you can't leave anyway. So I am Justin Lindstrom, and I'm going to be your moderator today. We are going to have a panel discussion and a conversation with you. We thought with this particular topic, it would be better to be in a conversation rather than having a PowerPoint and slides and all that kind of stuff. So if you're expecting that, we've locked the doors and you can't leave. So, but welcome to the 8th Annual Pathways to Hope Conference. We're glad that you are here, and we are so excited to have this particular session. If you are needing CEUs, so continuing education units, you can get those. So we're glad that you're here for that. You must pick up a piece of paper at the end, and there it is right there. So pick that up. You'll also get an online evaluation, and you have to fill out that evaluation to get the actual credits. And you must remain in this session for the entire time to get your full credit. All these rules. So if you need to leave for the bathroom, I think that's excusable, but I don't know. So we're going to have a great conversation today, and we've got three folks here at our panel. We have Mitch Holbrook, who is here, a licensed counselor, right? Dr. Ramamurthy, she is an MD and in this space of mental health and faith, and so we're glad that you are here as well. And then Beth Stanley, who is a licensed counselor as well as master's in theology, right? Yes, so got that right. So here we go. We're just going to jump on in because we've got a lot of ground to cover. It's not a light topic, right, where these two things intersect. And there is a deep connection, I believe, between mental health and spiritual health. I wouldn't be standing here before you as an Episcopal priest if I didn't believe that. And I actually believe that our physical, intellectual, emotional, and spiritual health are all intertwined. And when we're suffering in one, we're suffering in all four aspects of who we are. And we can't just treat one aspect without treating the others. And so we're going to be talking about how the mental health and the spiritual health interface and connect. And so here's our first question. Why are mental health and spiritual health better together, right? So how do they complement each other, and how are they interconnected? And so whoever wants to jump in and start, they're gonna say a few words, and then we're gonna have some dialogue about this particular question, then we'll move on to a couple other questions, and then have some time for other questions at the end. So you want to hit it off, Beth?
Sure.
Go for it. You got to pick up the microphone.
Oh,
yep.
Gotcha. All right. So good to be with you guys. And I just wanted to start off saying that Better Together is why we're here, thanks to NAMI, and they have created a space where we don't feel alone. We're not isolated. When there is mental illness, there's no longer stigma, hopefully, because we have a place to go. My journey with you all in this whole process started when I was 17, and I lost my brother to suicide. And that's when I started imagining what happened and where is he now. And so the mental health aspect, wondering what in the world causes someone to leave this earth by their own hand, and also just wondering where in the world, it put eternity in my heart because I was wondering where in the world is he now. And so that is how I began my journey. And it's been many, 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 many hard years of trying to come out. I'm not sure I've ever said that in public, to be honest. So it's a big deal, what we do. Viktor Frankl, this miraculous Holocaust survivor, said that abnormal reactions to abnormal circumstances are normal, right? And we have many abnormal situations that we're in. And so our bodies and our minds and our souls register that. Thanks to Bessel van der Kolk, we know that our bodies keep the score of the things that we've been through. And our bodies and our minds, they signal to us that things are wrong. And so we have to respect that. In some ways, our mental health struggles are about our souls trying to tell us that something is terribly wrong. And so, giving a nod to this priest and the spiritual piece of this, I was thinking about our oldest is a biology major, and we go round and round with the intricacies about DNA and things like stardust. And I just have this feeling, and I believe it because I've read about it, though she won't agree with me, that we're made of stardust, that there are elements of us that exist in our bodies. And with that, I think we are tapped into this infinite, vast universe where our souls are compelled to believe that there's a wholeness that we can achieve, and that this spiritual realm of our souls tells us that we can be more, that we're not built for just these mental health struggles, or when we feel stopped or tortured, it's not the end. We believe there's more. And so it's almost like a song in a way, like our mental health calls to our souls, and our souls say, we can have more in this life. So I'm excited to share all this with you guys and to explore these thoughts. So I'll stop now and pass this on.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Namaste. My understanding of the topic really comes from more reading and listening to online presentations by a certain guru. It kind of made a lot of sense to me. We were just talking at the beginning of this. How come we are here? How did I land here? I'm a neonatologist by profession, and I deal with the tiniest of tiny babies. And sometimes you wonder if they are going through mental aspects of things. I believe they do. And so it is not a topic that I have dealt with in a professional sense, but read a lot about it from a professional aspect also, because in medicine we are encountering, or maybe we are becoming more aware of, burnout. And I'm sure in every profession this is a concern. And that is what pushes educators like me to want to read more about these things, to know more about this, because we can be helpful to ourselves and to our trainees. And that is sort of the background with which I'm coming in front of you. And we'll talk much more about this as the discussion goes on. I'm going to leave it at that, and we will proceed.
Thank you. Well, good evening, good morning, whatever time of day it is.
Still morning.
Yes, thank you. I work second shift now, and I'll get to that in just a minute. But for 30 years, I was a licensed pastoral counselor in the state of Kentucky, and at that time, Kentucky was one of only 6 states in the nation that licensed that particular profession. Now, all that means is that I spent about 123 graduate hours getting a degree that's no way useful for me here in Texas. So you can understand that, spending all the time that you did in your career. And I am now a tour boat captain on the Riverwalk. Now, I tell you that because I think if I'd have been a tour boat captain before, I would have been a much better therapist later. For a lot of reasons, I get to deal with a lot of disordered people on my boat. Not necessarily because they're mentally disordered, because they have other objects and other things within them that help them to be disordered. But we're all use that language of disorder instead of crazy or whatnot, because we understand as mental health professionals that the way people behave, once we understand some of their background, some of their history, some of their physical aspects, their disorder begins to make sense to us. Well, at the same time, if we understand as people who sit with people during spiritual crisis, and whatever your spiritual outlook or lack thereof is, when you sit with someone in those kind of moments, it is a spiritual moment. You understand that there's a discourse or a dissonance between what's going on in their heart and in their head. And when we begin to understand and help folks organize their lives in the way that they need to function better, we can see that when we begin to see a creative moment within them. I know we've all been trained to, when folks walk in to see us, what are they wearing? Are they wearing dark clothes? Are they wearing heavy clothes when it's so cold outside like it is right now? Has something changed between now and then? And when we start seeing some of that difference, then they're making a motion in that way. And then they start talking about some of the things that are going on outside of their lives. What are they creating? What are they doing? What are they making with their hands? What are they reading? Are they being challenged? Because they're getting restored into the energy that they need to continue to live their life. So, when, in my opinion, or at least from this point of view at this moment, spiritual health and mental health is occurring when we see people who are creative, and whatever that might be. They're challenging themselves in new ways, learning new recipes, dressing different, taking a chance to go back to school and learn some things. And as was cited by Beth, abnormal times required abnormal responses. And we're dealing with a lot of anxiety. I mean, I'm not a practicing therapist right now, but believe me, I deal with a lot of anxiety within myself and around. And the reason being, if you're paying attention, you're not a little anxious, you need to wake up.
Thank you all. About 2.5 years ago, I was diagnosed with young onset Parkinson's disease. And that was a moment where my life took a turn pretty quickly. And we announced it to the church that I serve, and many people said, we're praying for you, and that really, when I wake up in the morning and I can't reach down and tie my shoes until I get, enough meds in me to where that can happen, I'm reminded of all the people praying for me. But about a month into this journey, my wife, I came home at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. She's like, what are you doing home? I don't come home at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I work till later than that. And I said, I'm just really tired and just grumpy. And she's like, well, you've got till 5 o'clock to find a therapist. I'm tired of being your therapist. and so I was like, yes, ma'am, which is my typical response to Susan. So that's why we've been married so long. But I really thought, y'all, that the prayers would sustain me. I really thought that, believed it, until I went to a therapist. And I was not adverse to going to therapy. I mean, not at all. I had been to therapy before for other things, and I went to therapy, and I was looking at a man who was 49. I'm 49. He was a military individual that suffered from a lot of PTSD and got into therapy because he wanted to help others in the same way that he had been helped. And he said, "You've got PTSD." I'm like, no. He goes, yes. And so we explored that together, and I can honestly say, from my own point of view, that getting that help and knowing that people were praying for me, those two things working together have actually allowed me to live with this chronic disease in a totally different way than I was 2.5 years ago. it's a blessing. And you might be like, well, how can, what I'm going through be a blessing? And I can share that with you later, but it is. And so I share that with you let's open the dialogue. How do you all, or do you have any questions for our panel of how the spiritual life and our mental health life work together or complement each other? What might be something that you want to ask the panel today, or maybe share with the rest of us? Yes, way in the back. Blurt it out.
Hi, I'm Carmen. One of the things that I've learned through personal experience with the mind-body-spirit connection is to look at everything very practical. According to the Oxford Dictionary, the definition of the spirit is a non-physical form in which our emotions reside. And I've heard other gurus speak on what emotion is, and emotion is really breaking it down to energy and motion. If such is the case, then I need to look at my personal energy and figure out why I'm reacting in the manner that I'm reacting. Because at that point in time, it is no longer behavior. I am reacting to a trauma that happened way before. So that is my response. And in recognizing that, if I can get my spirit into it, if I can get my body into it, because I already, coming from a military background, I know that physical fitness helps me because you begin to release endorphins and that makes me feel good. But in the manner of the spirit, I don't always have all the answers. I'm not a religious person, but I know that to me, God is good orderly direction. And if I seek good orderly direction to address my energy and motion, then I'm gonna have a journey to go through. And that's how I deal with it. So I'd like some feedback and see if that has worked for anybody else.
Yeah. Anyone on the panel?
I love what you're saying, Carmen. I so agree with you about the formlessness of our spirit and how we're housed in these bodies that we can't ignore, but they're going to one day disintegrate. And so it's like we really do have to find ways to be in touch with the formlessness of the almost like the consciousness that lives inside, the invisible part of us. And so we hopefully will delve into some practices. It sounds like you're adept at practices that help you to land in those places of the listening to the invisible and to the emotion and allowing that to make movement out of your life. And so I know we're going to talk about some of those things that help, but I love that you brought that into our awareness. I feel like that's so important that we all can tap into the invisible formlessness of us and how this doesn't matter. It will one day be gone, and this will live on our souls. So thank you, Carmen.
Yes, that resonates with me as well. Because when I read about the first question, where we are going to talk about mental health and spirituality, the first question that came to my mind was, what is spirituality to you? To you? To you? It is so different, I think, how we interpret spirituality. And so in generalizing something like that, we have to be so careful. So I thought of it as the atmosphere that we have to create for not children to be in, for adults to be in, for seniors to be in, for mental health, for the health of the mind. Human beings have a certain level, they need a certain level of psychological, emotional, and physical space and certain atmosphere to be nurtured. And if you think of it, that atmosphere is being eroded and it's going away. Take, for example, when a mother is feeding the baby, holding the baby close to the breast, relaxed. She's not worried about time, and she's doing that. What is happening now is holding the baby, here, sweetheart, hurry up, looking at the watch because she has to go to work. She has to, do something else. Not saying that women shouldn't be working, but just pointing out that atmosphere where from this childhood, baby, we are hurrying somewhere. Take the schools, for example. You go there and your goal is the grades. How can I be better than that person? Where do I stand in this whole process? And there is no time even for the teachers because they have to deliver a certain amount of that day's lesson. They can't just, spend 15 minutes allowing the children to sit quietly, being creative, mentally connecting with something, and there is no time for those kinds of activities. Take seniors. We are fending for ourselves most of the time. It's not like what used to happen in olden days where there was a family structure where the adults had a place in it, the older people had a place in it. Now we are all struggling to learn how to use this internet. Why can't somebody be at the other end of the telephone to talk to me, I don't understand any of that. I see you're all agreeing with that. And so this atmosphere, I think, is the reason why there is such an increase in the mental aspect of handling things. We are under so much pressure. So one of the things that we can do individually, like you were saying, is find ways to find calmness, to connect with consciousness, all that. But I think as a society, we really should be working towards changing this atmosphere. And I think that would be a very good step, and we have to constantly be working at it, constantly, so it becomes a way of life. It is not once a year a conference that we attend. It is not something that you're able to help a few people that you come in contact with, but it is really to change the way of life all of us lead. So that atmosphere is there. We don't have to worry about that. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for your service. And the word you use, practicality or practical, when folks would come in to me and they'd start talking the same thing we talked about the session before that, I knew they haven't done their homework. They have not been practicing what we've been talking about. And in both mental health and also in spiritual practice, there are things that we can do consistently that make us better, that help us to feel better, doing the things that your therapist suggested or your priest suggests, even though it makes you mad at times, because usually when they get mad, when I get mad, it's because they hit a sore spot. I may be the only one that does that. And my therapist back in Kentucky, what time I didn't hate her, I thought she was the greatest person in the world, taught me a Buddhist teaching. Don't believe everything you think, regardless of what your thoughts are telling you. I'm still wrestling with that one, and when I can remember that, things are. Don't believe everything you think, regardless of what your thoughts are telling you. Yeah, because I keep telling myself I look like Burt Reynolds.
Yes.
I've heard the Buddhist adage, when the student is ready, the teacher emerges. And I wonder, is there a spiritual aspect for a person to be ready to accept help from a psychiatrist and accept help from a counselor or therapist? Is there spiritual aspects of that?
Wow. So is there a spiritual aspect to accepting the help of a therapist?
Nobody comes to see us because things are going well. And when they get to that point in the Buddhist thought where staying where they are is more painful than changing, that is a spiritual moment. I cannot carry on myself. Sometimes that comes through a moment. You're sitting there reading the paper, if anybody still reads the paper. You're reading the internet. And there's just like a voice or an awakening or a moment where I have to do this. There's really not a choice, even though you do have a choice, and it still take you a moment, maybe up to 5 o'clock to get there. But there is at least a consistent that people came to me maybe from an outside push, but because they were ready to do that. And that's my experience. I guess it's pretty universal.
Go ahead, real quick. We got to get to the next question. Are you good? Okay. So our next question has to do with the practices that just recently just came up, and that is what are the practices or habits that can impact both the spiritual and our mental health, so what are some of those particular things that maybe you have suggested to folks that you're working with, and then be thinking about what works or what doesn't work for you all, and let's have a conversation around that. So what practices help us discover the unity or the complementary aspects of spiritual and mental health? Dr. Raja, do you want to start? Yeah.
I think this is the most significant part of a conference like this. What is it that we can do? What is it that you can take away from this conversation? So, have you all heard a lot recently in the last few years about being present? It's a buzzword, right? Being present. And I want to hear a few comments about what does that mean to you? Anybody? What does that mean to you, being present?
Give a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, well, yes. Go ahead. You came first.
Being present, not thinking forward or revisiting the past constantly, just being right in the moment. Because a lot of us don't do that. We don't stay right where we're at. We're thinking about what we did or what we're going to do, instead of just sitting in place, thinking of how it is right now. So that's what present is supposed to look like. Or that's my interpretation.
Yeah.
You could repeat what she just said.
So what you're saying is that you just think about what you're doing right now. Don't be thinking about what happened in the past, what's going to happen henceforth, but be here, be present, be thinking about this conversation and not about lunch. Yes.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I teach a lot of my patients about being in the now, but it's actually a skill that I believe you have to practice, because it doesn't just come like natural to you. A lot of times my clients are always thinking about everything. They live in the past because of trauma, because of whatever happened to them, right? So I teach them about it, living in the now. There's a good book, The Power of Now. And I read that book, and I recommend it because it's very important. You become more effective about, your decision making if you do it from the now rather than from the past or thinking about the future.
Very good. Thank you. Anybody else wants to comment? Yes, please. You had your hand up. Yeah.
As a Buddhist, I would say, and a clinician, I would say a lot of people, you talk about mindfulness and nowness, and the best way to practice that is to use your sixth consciousness. Don't worry about 7 and 8, because you're 8 of them, but see what's right there in reality. Hear what you're hearing, sounds around you. Smell what you're picking up in the atmosphere. Taste especially when you're eating, to taste the food, and then to think, but to not believe what you think, but rather examine it with the 5 senses that you have. That's a good way to practice it.
Thank you.
Can you encourage people to speak very loud?
Yes.
Yes.
Or just repeat?
There was somebody over there.
Is that the same thing as mindfulness? What we teach in therapy is
Yes.
mindfulness?
Mindfulness.
Yes.
Yes, mindfulness is, a thing that's talked about a lot, written about a lot. This individual I kind of listen to a lot, Guru. He says that the past is just a memory, right? The past is just a memory, and the future is just in your imagination. You don't know. It's just there in your imagination. The present is what you know for sure. You are present. You are here. Nobody can deny that. So this is the present, and you have this practice of being in the present is probably something that we can start off with very young children, giving them a handle in this.
There was an individual right there, yes.
I'd like to make a comment. It doesn't necessarily talk about being present.
Speak up.
I'm sorry. I'm confused with that. I'd like to make a comment. It doesn't necessarily have to do with being present. But I do feel that there is a real problem with uneducated and malaeducated pastors and clergy practicing counseling without the requisite training to do those kinds of things. And I feel like it is a real problem because people get led down roads and paths. They don't really learn anything about themselves, and they don't really deal with the important issues that they need to deal with. They're just told some flippant thing like just pray it away or something of that nature, and that's just not it's just not acceptable in this day and time. And so I went back to school. It took me 22 years to get my PhD, and I do not appreciate having my members be pushed into corners by these people who just don't know what they're doing. Thank you.
Yes.
Well, I had a comment when you were talking about living in the present. To me, you cannot live, in the past. You learn from it, but you cannot live in the past. And you cannot live in the future because you have no control over it. And going back to prayer, like what he was saying, I've been reading, and prayer is not magic, but prayer is a relationship with God. And so that's what the praying is all about, is your relationship communicating with God.
Beth, would you repeat that? Just briefly what she just said.
Yes, yes, thank you.
If you want to comment on the question?
Yeah, I will. Do we want to? Okay, so you're talking about, thank you, about how prayer is not magic, but it's about having a conversation and talking with God. Yeah. And that is part of being present and being mindful of heart. Yeah. And I know we want to get on to our next topic at hand. I would love to share just quickly. I'm going to run through some practices because for me, some of this discussion about being present and meditative, we hear a lot about that, and I believe in it and the power and the mysterious, mystical power of meditation, and yet it is so difficult because it is entering into an unknowing, and yet it pulls us to that formlessness that we need to tap into the invisible, where there's a wise voice inside of us, and I'm so compelled about that for myself. I just want to share real quick some ideas. You guys may have heard of this, but there is this beautiful Tibetan word called Tonglen, and it's a Buddhist practice that for me, it helps me when I'm just trying to focus on my breath. And so the idea comes from the idea of what we resist persists. And so Tonglen links a difficult emotion to our inhale, and we inhale the difficult emotion, embracing the fullness of that experience. Then we exhale the opposite feeling, or a sense of compassion for self or others. For example, we could do this for ourselves or for others. I'm even thinking of a stray dog, like inhaling the dark, stormy, awful isolation of a stray dog, and then exhaling compassion and freedom and a home. So I don't know if that helps. For me, it's sometimes anxiety, and then exhaling peace. So that's one practice that helps me in meditation. Another thing is called RAIN. Tara Brach is an amazing psychologist and meditation teacher, and she teaches the practice of RAIN, which is to recognize first the emotion that you feel, to allow the emotion. I is to investigate that feeling and finding it in your body. And then N is to nurture that feeling. What does that feeling call for? What does that need? And then another meditative practice from our ancient spirituality is called centering prayer, or contemplative prayer. And it's a wonderful 20-minute sit where you're in silence and you have a word, like a word that you return to, much like we return to our breath when we're in meditation. In contemplative prayer, we find a word like love or holy or sacred, and we return to that. So those are some key ideas for meditation. Another practice is writing, journaling. Some of you may know the artist teacher, Julia Cameron, who encourages us to do morning pages, 3 pages, first thing you do in the morning for 12 weeks, committing to it, and see what might change in your life. People have lost their addictions, written famous playwrights, and changed careers just by doing morning pages. James Pennebaker, who's at UT in Austin, he talks about how our mental health and our physical health can be improved when we write for just 15 minutes a day for 3 or 4 days consecutively about an event or about something we're struggling with, and attaching meaning, going into our unconsciousness, going into what it means to us. That can help us. So writing is a big thing. I call this like a nature wash. Just being in nature for 30 seconds. Research shows that if you can let the experience fill you, see the beauty, feel it, hear it, just for 30 seconds, dopamine is released, and there's a moment, then a fresh new moment for you. I think of this also, a circle of heroes. Like, we all have people that we look to, right? Living, gone from us. Think of 6 people that can be your board of directors, and put them above your head, and let them float over you, and let them be with you. And that is a practice that can lead you deeper to yourself. And then the last thing I just want to share is there's nothing that can beat silence and solitude. It's hard, but entering into a day of silence, 3 hours of silence, 1 hour of silence, it's good, right? And solitude allows us to just be with ourselves. So I just want to throw those out there as opportunities for you. And
really quick.
Yeah.
The way I keep it all together is yesterday's history, tomorrow's the mystery. All we have is now, the gift of now. That's why it's called the present.
Yes.
Oh, I love that, the present.
Real quickly, we've talked about meditation, and we could do that for days. I have found helping others helps a great deal. I mean, that can be helping someone across the street, bag groceries, but helping others, stepping outside of ourselves. The term redemption can be a very loaded question, but if you get a coupon, if you read down there, it's less. It used to be it's worth about 1/20th of a cent until you use it. But once you redeem it, it's worth a lot more. So finding something to redeem, be that a piece of furniture or a relationship or, something about yourself that you need to change within that. Sometimes just finding it leads to a great deal of health. And ultimately, or not ultimately, but finally movement. If you find yourself stuck, move. I know that seems really constant, but the reason we're stuck is because we're comfortable there until we have bed sores or everything else. Move, do something different. Go for a walk. Get up and change chairs if you need to. Get a job, a different job for a little while. So.
We're going to move to our final question, and then hopefully we'll be able to have some more dialogue for the rest of our time. We close at 12:30, and that's lunchtime, so we'll make sure we close on time. So when do we know when there is mental health and spiritual health? When do we know that? That's the question, is when do we know that they are working together? What do you feel? What does it look like? What does it feel like? And how do you know you are better? Just a small question to tackle. So.
Yes, it's a small question. All of us want to be happy. I think pursuit of happiness is the bottom line for human beings. And when you see that person happy, you know there is some healing happening. When you see that you yourself are feeling happiness, that is a sign of healing. This whole thing is about pursuit of happiness. What is it that is going to give that happiness to you?
The biggest moment for me is when I start hearing myself or other folks asking difficult questions and no longer being afraid to do so. That they found the strength, they have the practice, or they're doing the practices that require them to face some difficulties at the moment, and even are somewhat excited to finally tackle a mountain that they have avoided or circle around for too long. And in doing that, they understand and accept that there's pain, there's sorrow, there's sadness, but there's also excruciatingly wonderful joy, health, presence, and direction in that. So when I find those moments when something comes up that is not very comfortable, and yet I'm willing to step in it, then things seem to be going at least going in the right direction. Now that I've arrived, arriving is not a lot of fun, because once you're there, then what you going to do? That's right.
Never dock the boat.
Never dock.
Okay, I'm just going to throw out 5 things that strike me. I love what you said, Mitch, about not arriving, because as much as I want to arrive, I have this feeling I never get there. I always think, oh, maybe I'm closer, and then I'm just not. But what I want to believe with you all is that maybe when I mention these things, you'll say, oh yeah, that feels right and true, and then maybe we can all know that we're a little bit farther along than we realize. Because when we are discouraged and we think we are not close to arriving, there is a contracting, a closing off that happens inside of us, and it shuts us down. It shuts our bodies down. It shuts our hope. But if we can believe that we're closer and we're growing and we're transforming, then there's an opening and an expanding of our hearts and of our souls. And I feel like from that place, there's a fragrance of change and hope. And so with that, I just want to throw out these 5 things, and y'all can say, nix nay, no way, or yeah, me too. So one of the things things that strikes me, we've been talking about it, but it's that there's an awareness, an awakenedness, a consciousness where we are able to be present, as we've been talking about, and where we can read between the lines, or we see when someone's sad, or we notice something beautiful. That awareness, I think, is something that is evident in transformation. Another thing is tapping into your creativity, making beauty, knowing beauty, noticing beauty. We're all creative beings. I have an artist husband and 4 children who are all artists, and I think I'm not, and they're always like, no, Mom, you can be creative. And really, when I pursue that, and when I've seen others, I met with a client this morning who was writing poetry, never written poetry before, and it is just flowing out. There's something about that is fueling transformation. Another thing is being able to enter into the mystery of life, not having to have all the answers, being able to walk in darkness at times, and not getting completely lost, but kind of hanging on until light appears. I think that's an important thing. Also, having compassion and empathy. Compassion is the antidote to shame, and empathy is an antidote to judgment. And these are things that are processes and practices that hopefully we're trying to learn as we're growing and transforming. And then lastly is something I call floor sitting. And I learned about this when I used to be a chaplain and a counselor for hospice. And I found myself sitting on the floor when I would go into people's houses or bedrooms where they were in those sacred spaces of passing away. And we would find ourselves sitting on the floor, and it was holy and good and painful, and there's something about, it's a metaphor, but it's also a reality that when we sit on the floor, there's something about being grounded in the earth, but also feeling pain for ourselves and others. So I use that word, floor sitting, as a way of sitting in our pain and being willing to sit and be with pain until it transforms. So those are a few ideas.
Any other questions?
I just want to say,
Yeah.
I live in awe of people that can help other people that have mental problems. I've got a daughter that's been a bipolar with schizophrenic presentation for 30 years. And there's times when I try to forget the past, and that's hard, and try to be there in the now with her. She's not here.
Right.
She's in a different here. And at that time, all I can do basically is comfort her a little and then withdraw before it hurts me. So, like listening to you guys that can help someone, I guess they're not related to you, which helps them. But I live in awe of you that have that talent and that experience.
So Jack was saying that it brings him awe when someone can be in the present, especially when we're in the midst of our own journeys. The people that we love the most may not be able to be present with you, and it's hard to be present with them, right?
She's not in the here. She's in some other world.
She's in a different dimension and place, and to be present with her is incredibly difficult. So
the only thing I remember from the psych class I took as an undergrad was the teacher says, if you're dealing with somebody that has a hallucination, it's real.
Yeah.
Try to tell them it's not real. It's real. You can be with them, but you can't make that.
Right. Yeah, all of this is hard, right? And what I have found in my life is it's easier, not easy, but easier with other people around you when we're together in it and walking together. So the spiritual realm and the mental health realm have to work together. Clergy need to be trained of what they should do and shouldn't do, right? And counselors that that I hand people off to because we've gone to a place where I can't go because I'm not licensed. I need to be confident that they can take hold of that person and walk with them in a way that is compassionate and loving and caring as well. And so we have to build that trust between the two disciplines. But they got to work together too, right? So that's what I think this conference, as well as Bridges to Care San Antonio and the other trainings that are out there, what we're trying to do is to create a bridge. That's what's called Bridges to Care. Bridge between the different entities that care. So we're not siloed anymore, but we're in one house together called life, and we're working together. So I can walk next to Jack as he struggles with a family member as a clergy person, but I cannot replace his therapist, right? But I can walk with you and pray for you and hold your arm and walk hand in hand and be a companion along the road.
Real quickly, you are doing holy work.
Yes.
As you know. I mean, you're sitting with those who are painful, giving them comfort. And something you said that was very important, give them a little comfort, then I go so before it hurts me. That is a huge lesson. Early in my practice, I worked at a community mental health center. I was down at the intake, and the next office over, there was a very seasoned therapist, and the psychiatrist was in there doing a med check with an individual. I heard a loud clang. Well, being the good Southern gentleman that I am, if there's somebody in trouble, I got to go fix it. As I got to the door, the therapist was coming out with the biggest pistol I have ever seen in my life. And the gentleman had got triggered with some stuff that had happened in Vietnam. And so instead of being in a safe place, we were all Vietnamese. And he was serious about making sure that he got out of there alive. It was time for me to go. And we part of this practice is understanding that I can only do so much. I hope to watch over you so you don't get hurt, but I can't help anybody if you're going to hurt me physically. So, bless you, sis.
Yes.
I had two thoughts as I was listening to you, Justin, and others. One is the beauty of us, the bridging idea, that we come here from, whether I'm personally the one suffering with mental health, or I'm a counselor, or I'm a pastor, or whatever our professional background is and where we're working from. The beauty is that, I'm going to lose my thought here, I've talked too long. The beauty is that we need each other. I learned the term pastoral initiative a long time ago, and a pastor can take initiative and go knock on that parishioner's door and check in on them and take some initiative that the therapist does not take because it goes against the work they're doing, where they need to know that the patient is ready and willing enough to take the initiative to come, make the call, sign up for the appointment. So we need each other to fill in all these gaps because we can't all work the same. And that was the main thought. The other one maybe I'll come up.
Can I ask one question?
Yes.
In struggling with my daughter, I read a lot, and I read across the concept of spiritual warfare.
Spiritual warfare?
Do you guys have any experience with that concept? The spiritual side?
It looks a lot different for different moments. And throughout our scriptures, the Christian scriptures, there are moments where there were spiritual things going on. I learned a different language in training to have the credential that I have, that the spiritual warfare makes more sense when you understand how it plays out in the real life. And if whatever is going on within your daughter has a spiritual side to it as well. It's going to look different to her than it does to the rest of us. Absolutely it does, but it is just as vibrant and just as, or can be just as healthy as within us. But it's going to take some practice for her to be able to do that. So the warfare would be, how do we travel with her until she can find that in a self and healthy way? And to answer your question, I could talk with you for a week about that, but I can't do that right now.
Yeah. I think it is very important for us to not discount the traditional way we have all been taught about praying, saying prayers, because there are so many new things coming into the vocabulary, like being present or meditation, or so many things have come about in the last several years. But the traditional praying shouldn't be discounted. That's one thing I wanted to mention, because that is something that can be taught from childhood. Just hang your hat there, just hang your hat there when in trouble. The other thing that has really helped me personally, when I have had family situations where it's not a troublesome situation, it is a painful situation. I have a nephew who has become an alcoholic, and trying to get him out of that. That kind of a thing is very difficult. Writing is a very good way for the healer or the therapist or those of us who are trying to work with these situations. If we could write things down, it's a very comforting way of handling some of these things.
Yes.
I just wanted to say, because we're at the Tobin Center, that they have a wellness program here that works with mind body. So on the Saturdays from 9 to 10 every week, there is either meditation, yoga, some kind of a movement or a dance modality. So look up wellness on the Tobin Center.
So Tobin Center, every Saturday, some kind of wellness practice is happening here from 9 to 10 a.m. Great. Yes.
Yeah, so going back to the original question, it was like, how do you know you've gotten there, the whole mind, body, and spirit?
Yes.
The truth of the matter is that from an individual standpoint, you never get there.
Right.
I mean, happiness is only momentary, right? Like it's only in the moment. That's why everybody was talking about staying in the present moment. It's a really conscious decision. Like you really have to be conscious about staying present. We're in the 21st century where everything is electronic and artificial intelligence, right? That's why you have to be conscious when you stay in the present. Why do you think they call it scrolling when you're going through your phone?
Yeah.
You're trying to feed yourself mentally, right? In the spiritual sense, if I'm trying to grow, I really know that I've grown when I feed the trifecta. What am I mentally feeding my mind? What am I spiritually feeding my spirit? What am I physically feeding my body? And I know I've gotten there when I've done a little bit more growth. So no, it was never about the destination, but it's always been about the journey.
Yes.
And I guess that's what I was trying to get at. And yeah, you're right. Pretty good.
So it's not about the destination, but it's about the journey. She mentioned that we have to feed our soul, feed our mind, and feed our body, and that's what we're doing next, right? Is feeding our body. So, and some of you have been moving already towards that. And so, if you pre-purchased your lunch, that counter is the one right over on my right, your left. So as you go down, go to that counter. If you still need to purchase your lunch, I think it's on this side that you can do that. And thank you all for being here. Take care. Make sure you pick up your evaluations for your CEUs.